the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history, unerased, of a sisterhood, of a race. It's the strength for me, it's the strength, it's the legacy, it's the faith, it's the history, unerased, of a sisterhood, of a race.
She wrote the book. We did. Black women. Legions of us. Scribes and storytellers across genres and times. We are prolific window openers on the world. Trace it to Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, bold abolitionist, poet, and suffragist. She was the first Black woman to publish a novel in 1892. From there, many more wrote the book. Freedom writers, their pen a mighty sword. They beat back tropes and slights by defining us through characters recognized and revered. The Zoras, the Tonys, the Mayas, and the Terrys. They're joined by scholars and lesser-known fiction and nonfiction writers who we discover every day and unerase them with page-turning affirmations. She wrote the book is our grand and continuous tribute to Black women authors, publishers, booksellers, book clubbers, most of all, Black women readers. Because we read the book, voraciously inhaling the imagination and ideals, intelligence, and brilliance that Black women breathe into bound editions, our creative energy soars. And legacy is not only detailed, it dares to be indelible. I'm Gwen McKinney for Unerased Black Women Speak.
Welcome back to Unerased. I am your host, Carolyn Malachi.
My name is Marita Golden, award-winning author, literary consultant, writing coach, and literary activist, and co-founder of the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation.
Truly an honor to be joined by a literary powerhouse. Marita Golden, we are so proud that you're helping Unerased Black Women Speak launch our new initiative, She Wrote the Book. So writer, teacher, mentor, coach, literary institution builder. As a co-founder of the Hurston Wright Foundation, you've enjoyed unparalleled standing stretching over 40 years and 19 books. Let's rewind the script to your beginnings as a storyteller. What got you started?
Well, I think I just sort of came into the world as a storyteller to tell stories. I was always a very curious child. I read everything that I could get my hands on. And from a very early age, I was writing. I was writing poetry, stories, letters to the editor, everything. And so writing was very early for me a way that I lived in the world. It just came naturally to me. I always enjoyed it. And it was, as I say, it's just a way I've lived in the world, and I continue to live in the world through writing.
I mean, I personally identify with that. I've been writing since I was a kid. In fact, I wrote a letter to Eloise Greenfield, and I was just so excited when she wrote me back. Mm-hmm. I asked her for advice, and she said, just keep writing. You said that you came of age in an era when Black women writers were breaking new ground as literary voices. So who are some of those women, and how did they inspire you?
Well, when I was in college, Nikki Giovanni was editing an anthology of poetry. I found out about it, and I submitted a poem. She included it in the anthology. So that was my first real publication in terms of creative writing. And of course, Nikki at that time was establishing herself as a profoundly important voice for poetry, as well as speaking out for social justice. And as I was in my 20s, there were people like, of course, Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Maya Angelou, all of them were, and Toni Cade Bambara, Audre Lorde. I mean, Audre Lorde was somebody who I actually met and who read some of my early work and told me to keep writing, which a telephone call from her I will always treasure. So these were women who were doing extraordinary things. They were really breaking through a lot of barriers, establishing new standards. And they were very important for me to be reading. So I think all of them in different ways were profoundly important for me to see in the world and to read.
It's a very diverse group of writers that you mentioned. It makes me think about your work, which is multidimensional, covering genres from memoirs to novels to anthologies to nonfiction. What motivates you to tell these stories in so many diverse and far-flung formats?
Well, that's an interesting question. Stories come to me in different ways. A lot of times I'll get called to write a story. That is, I'll end up writing a story that I had absolutely no idea that I was going to write, but I literally got called. I call it getting my assignment from God. And I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I figure if I've been assigned that work to do, I'll figure it out. And then sometimes I will choose. A lot of times when I'm doing nonfiction books, like, say, when I wrote my memoir, Migration to the Heart, my very first book, I was writing that as a way to understand what it had meant for me to come of age as a young Black woman in the 70s who lived in Africa for a while, had a cross-cultural marriage, and then had to make herself all over again. So when I write memoirs, I'm really trying to find the meaning of my experience, the meaning of what my life has been, and also the meaning of the gifts that my life has given me. And what's very satisfying is that when I write memoir, it ends up being a gift for other people. So I'm building a bridge from my life into theirs. And when I'm writing fiction, I'm usually sort of obsessed with a question. Often, for example, when I wrote my novel about Alzheimer's disease, the question was, how does a marriage survive a disease like Alzheimer's? When I wrote my novel After, about a police officer who kills a young man during a police stop, the question was, how does a family survive that? But also it mostly became, because he became the main character, how does a police officer survive killing someone by mistake, essentially? And it became a really rich character study. So usually my novels are the result of a question, a dramatic question about human nature and character. And then I'll write 300 pages to answer the question.
My name is Melody Guy, and I'm a senior editor at Hay House. In my previous career, when I worked at Random House, I headed up multicultural imprints, so I got to publish a lot of writers of color across various genres, and I was really a champion for them in-house, and I think you need someone like that. I think that's just it, more Black women as editorial directors, as publishers, making those decisions, not just about what's published, but in terms of how people are paid. There are some white authors who are going to have huge audiences because they, are tapped into different things, but maybe we need a different measurement when it comes to authors of color who may not have all those networks. But I can tell you some recent titles that have hit the New York Times lists by Black authors, the Tiffany Aliche, the Budgetnista book, Tabitha Brown, that recently hit the list, and she was just on Ellen. We're certainly seeing support of those kinds of authors. When I look on even TikTok and Book Talk, I see a lot of Black women readers talking about fantasy, talking about romance. So I think that we're reading everything.
So you're not afraid of an ugly protagonist, someone with a complicated history?
Yeah, they make the best protagonists. They're scary, but I know I've told people recently that I'm ready to go back into writing fiction because I'm looking forward to being in that scary, dangerous place that fiction puts you in, where you have characters under pressure in crisis, and they have to travel through this very difficult place to figure out how they can go on and who they can be. And it's quite scary, but as a creative person, anybody who's in the arts is used to fear. And fear is an enticement or a seduction to the creative person rather than something that is a caution.
I would like to talk a little bit about your first book, 1983, Migrations of the Heart, and your recent book in 2021, The Strong Black Woman. What are the threads of similarity between these two books, and how are the stories vastly different?
Well, in Migrations, I'm telling pretty much a straight through memoir, a document of coming of age. But in The Strong Black Woman, How a Myth Endangers the Physical and Mental Health of Black Women, I use a format that I've defined as communal memoir, where I will take a subject and I will write about that subject in a series of personal essays. But I will also include in the narrative conversations, dialogues, interviews, testimony, witnessing from other people about that subject, so that I envision the format as being almost like a quilt or a chorus of voices, so that what connects both books is both books are very personal. And even though the new book, The Strong Black Woman, contains everything from, statistics on mental health to quotes from medical documents, it is pretty much at the beginning and end a story. It is a story of Black women struggling to be emotionally, mentally healthy. But everything I write is a story. I can get Black women to talk about the strong Black woman complex and how they have redefined it, and how the traditional definition of it became something that was crushing them. So both books are intensely personal, and both books do continue my story. I mean, I'm now 70. I used to joke and say, I never get tired of writing about myself, but the fact is that I'm writing about myself at different points in my life, and I've been very pleased by the response to the book. Many women see themselves in these stories.
For you, as a writer and as a Black woman living in your skin, living your life, your history, where is the balance between strength and softness? Where can that be found today for Black women who really, it's not just work-life balance, it's life balance. Where does that exist?
That's something that I've dealt with and tried to answer and created solutions to for most of my life. My mother died when I was 21 and my father died when I was 22. Because I saw my parents die when I was pretty young, I decided to make living a very healthy life a priority. I mean, their early deaths, quite frankly, scared me. And I wanted to make sure that I could do everything I could to live longer than they had. And so, fortunately, I was coming of age at a time when things like meditation was being discussed and being practiced by a lot of people. We were having public conversations about vegetarianism and health and dieting and exercise. So that I was fortunate to grow up at a time when a lot of the conversations we need to have to support good health mentally and physically those conversations were being had. They were no longer conversations that people felt were taboo or that you had to keep in the closet. I was not hesitant, for example, about going into therapy when I felt confused or lost or overwhelmed. And I pretty much practiced some form of physical activity all my life: yoga, Pilates, walking, cardio. And I think the most challenging thing for me was learning to set boundaries, to say no to things that I didn't want to say yes to. And I'm pretty good at that. And it always amazes me the number of women who are very highly accomplished, very distinguished, who really have difficulty saying no. And one of the most important things that I taught myself was how to say yes to myself, to joy, to celebration, to treating myself the way I want to be treated. And being in therapy at various times helped me on that path a lot too. So we're at a point now where Black women are really re-examining the strong Black woman ideology, that Black women are inherently super strong. that everyone has to depend on us and we can never say no. So I'm just really glad to be part of that conversation. It's overdue. I don't think it could have happened at any other time because our grandmothers, their mothers, our mothers did the best they could within a different societal framework. But now we do have that language and we're using it to dismantle a toxic belief system.
Yes, that we can run 24/7 and be everything to everyone and nothing to ourselves. That's flawed logic.
My name is Kesey Cofield. I'm based in Richmond, Virginia, and I am a book and food blogger. Well Read and Fed started just as a way for me to share, what I was eating and reading with my family and friends. I believe one of my followers reached out to do an interview with me. And from that interview, it just started to grow into something much larger than I could have ever imagined. Once I hit the 2,000 follower mark, I was like, wait, this is, no longer a hobby. This is, I have people that actually look forward to my posts and people that actually look forward to my recommendations. I still struggle with the whole influencer thing. I think that there are so many readers, Black women, Black men in general. Having this page really has shown me just the different communities of Black women specifically that read. And I follow a ton of, Black women bookstagrammers, Black women authors, and they're all amazing people with their own followings. And so it goes to show that we actually do read, but I think ways in which we can kind of change that narrative. When I share book recommendations, I try and do it in a way that's personalized, in a way that kind of highlights the book in a way that makes it interesting. I think that sometimes people just struggle with finding a good book, but there's a book for everything, just kind of like television or movies. There's whatever your niche is, whatever you're interested in, there's a book for that. So I think it is kind of putting the onus on, Black bookstagrammers to highlight books like that, to have, a variety of books, whether it's sci-fi or romance or just anything like that, to share with their followers.
So we're launching the She Wrote the Book series because we know Black women are not only prolific writers, but also voracious readers who support our sister authors. Can you speak to that in regard to your own commercial success?
Well, when I started with Clyde McIlvaine, the Hearst to Bride Foundation, that was an act of literary cultural activism as well as political. And for me and Clyde, we wanted to create a community where Black writers could find the kind of support they needed. So I've been involved in that kind of work for over 30 years, supporting emerging Black writers, working as a mentor. And when I talk to young writers, I always tell them that giving back and supporting their fellow writers is a huge part of what they need to do and are supposed to do and are expected to do.
You coach a lot of people, mostly Black women, who have a book in them, surging to get out. What is the most important advice you'd share with would-be authors about writing and publishing?
Writing and publishing are two very different things. I think that the most important thing is to listen to your authentic voice. I think you know what your story is, and don't be afraid to embrace it. It will come to you in ways that seem crazy, paradoxical, confusing, conflicting. But if it keeps coming to you like that, it's coming to you like that so that you can make sense of it. And I think that what sometimes happens is as we gain skill and confidence, we may want to sacrifice authenticity. It's very important to hold on to the parts of your voice, the parts of your story that are uniquely yours. But I think even in getting published, you want to not sacrifice the essential qualities of your story that make it unique. Sometimes publishers will want to do that. They'll want to put you in a particular box. They want you to be the same flavor of the month. But it's really important to know what your story is and to hold on to its authenticity. Every story will find its expression in its right time. I mean, my goodness, you can take your cell phone and you can film a picture. You can edit it on your cell phone. I mean, you can do the equivalent with music. So that you're the boss. There's never been a time when people have had more power, more independent power to control their work, their art. So when people tell you no and you want to say yes, you can just close the door and go where you can say yes.
I saw a really cool interview with Octavia butler, obviously from a long time ago. And it just really impressed me how balanced she was in her thinking, not just about the creative, but also about the sustainability of it, where to market her work, where to place it. And these are such important considerations. Like, she had to tell her publishers, I'm not a science fiction writer. I'm not writing for 14-year-old boys. This is not Star Wars.
She's writing for the ages. Yeah. Yeah.
Finally, since the publishing world has changed so dramatically over the decades, and so many of us have resorted to self-publishing, what's your perspective on bypassing the industry gatekeepers and doing it yourself? Any strategies you'd like to share?
In April of this year, I will be offering a self-publishing A to Z workshop with Tracy McGee, who's an award-winning author and independent publishing strategist. And people can find out about that by going to my website. I think it is a totally legitimate and reasonable alternative. We just have too many. We have really a lot of writers in this country, people in this country who have amazing stories to tell and who can actually write those stories quite well. The industry simply cannot absorb all of those stories. So therefore, independent publishing is a very viable option. There are challenges with it, but there's challenges even when you're published by a mainstream publisher. So I think it's legitimate if you have the stamina, because it does require a lot, but I think it's entirely doable.
Perfect way to close this. Thank you so much, Marita Golden.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
My name is Bernadine Watson. My friends call me Dean, and I am a nonprofit writer and poet in Washington, D.C. Writing was never a hobby for me. I made my living writing for many years. I wrote social policy papers and reports for major foundations. I've also done some freelance for the Washington Post, so I always had a passion for writing. I think it came from my upbringing. We were readers in my household. One of the things that my parents would let us do, because we weren't allowed to just go outside and play on the street all the time, but we could go to the library. I remember back when there were bookmobiles that used to pull up in front of my elementary school. And after school, my sisters and I would go to the bookmobile and check out books. And that foundation of reading, I think, is what fueled my passion for writing. The idea that I could write a book was somewhat foreign to me. It just seemed very big and sort of beyond my capacity. But now that I have actually finished a manuscript, my next goal is to get the book finalized, to be able to see it and hold it, and then to get it out into the world. I just want to have the capacity, the endurance, the strength to actually birth my book to the public and get it out there. I wrote a book about my experience with a rare kidney disease called focal segmental glomerular sclerosis. And it's a disease that primarily affects African American people. So I guess my goals for what I would like readers to get from my book, you never know what's going to happen to you in life. You have to decide that you're going to live your life to the fullest, no matter what happens. You're going to tell your story, that your story is worth telling. I'd like others to learn from the changes that they might have to face in life and the courage that it takes to face what you have to face in life.
Visionary Grandmother, a poem. Written by Tanya Maria Matthews and performed by spoken word artist Ja Hipster. The problem with the situation is she had a visionary grandmother. Not talking message in the coffee grain twist in the tea leaf sight beyond sight type seeing. Not talking about shortbread recipe spoonful of this dash of that eyeball and flour measurements type sight. I'm talking vision. That lady with the age-old eyes saw her in the making, saw unbowed back, unbowed tongue, and unapologetic swagger before we even invented the word swagger. That young gal is a real problem, but it ain't all her fault. See, she had a visionary grandmother. So she walking around with all that brown skin, all that nappy hair, sashaying like she made out of gold. Didn't get the memo, but she sure got message. Carrying a black card, wearing black pearls, keeping her business in the black, don't even own a little black dress, 'cause the new black ain't nothing but the old black being what it been. And that girl, black, is a whole lot more than beautiful. With her, black, a little bit of bold, and a whole lot of dangerous. She more grounded than petroleum, refined and glowing from the inside. The problem with this self-renewing resource is she don't need you, and it shows. I can see why you're mad, but it ain't all her fault. She had a visionary grandmother. One of those 80-plus-year-old church-going, great migration trekking, job-having, dinner-making, child-rearing, we shall be overcoming, raised your daddy and your mama to raise you like a daughter, you in looking tired, honey, close the front door, child, how's all the schooling going, never saw it, but still black president believing in visionary type grandmother. Actually, she had two. That's why that girl got issues. Issues with expectations. Brothers should be behind bars instead of owning bars, passing bars, or raising the bars they helped define in the first place. She got issues with sisters being called out their name, sisters who don't know their name, sisters who don't train sons, husbands, or boyfriends to refer to her by a proper name. She got issues with poverty in the nation's capital, no lights on in Puerto Rico, letting certain lone gunmen shoot themselves while others get blown up with a robot drone. And she still got issues with New Orleans, 'cause they never intended for all the people to come home. She got issues with serve and protect, getting picky about who is served and protected. She got issues with underfunded schools next to overfunded dog parks, appeasing the gentrified and elected. She got issues with sons pulled over in the car she bought for them, issues with daughters dissed for freedom songs she taught to them. She got no issues with all the marches that are finally happening, but she do got issues with the newly woke. Where y'all been? Careful, that girl got so many issues, she about to develop a vision of her own. She visioning a world where to whom much is given, all is multiplied. And that gonna make her a problem in quite a few folk eyes. Please, please, don't judge her so harshly. It really ain't all her fault. Can't compare her to another. The problem with this here child simply is that she had a visionary grandmother.
Thanks for listening to Unerased Black Women Speak, made possible by support from the Craig Newmark Philanthropies, the Park Foundation, TD Charitable Foundation, and anonymous donors. Our theme song is Unerased by Carolyn Malachi. We had help from Joshua Levi Perrin, Alyssa Davis, Alex Kavoris, coordinating producer Stephanie Renee, and audio producer and host Carolyn Malachi. I'm Gwen McKinney, creator and executive producer, inviting you to tune in to our next episode. And while you're there, please subscribe and visit us online at unerasedbws.com.
Unerased of a sisterhood of